This is Regained Wellness Podcast with Jamie Logie, episode 151, Intermittent Fasting.
And we go a little something like this. Hit it.
Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jamie Logie. I run regainedwellness.com, and you are here at the Regained Wellness Podcast. Thanks for coming on out. I appreciate it. Today's show is going to have a lot of science and a lot of my own personal experiences because we're talking about intermittent fasting, fasting in general, big topic, probably one of the more, bigger movements in health, fitness, and nutrition. And I don't know if it's something you've done or if you looked into or you wanted to know more of the insights behind it, how it works, the research. This will have you all covered. So there'll be a lot in this episode. But before we get to it, make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I don't know where you get them. I won't judge. I won't ask. If you get them from iTunes, Apple Podcasts, that's awesome. But if not, anywhere you'd get a podcast, I should be there, like the Jackson 5. Okay, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get right into this. All right, so this is a big old subject, and we're looking at intermittent fasting in a few different ways, from the concept of time-restricted eating, where you only eat over a 8-hour period or 6 to 8 hour period, and then you fast for like a 16-hour period, up to, full 24-hour fasts. And fasting, obviously nothing new. It's been around, and people have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And now it's being seen as maybe an effective tool to enhance not just how you look, but how your body functions and hormone levels. And then, with how you look, lower body fat, maybe some more lean muscle, better cognitive function. So, generally, everyone knows what hunger feels like. It's usually after 4 to 5 hours after you've eaten. And it's, kind of a reminder that you feel like you should be eating. You may not even be hungry, but your stomach will let you know. And if you do let that go for a while, it immediately diminishes. And after a while, even if you haven't eaten, you get less hungry. And the problem is people live in panic of not being able to eat or going 2 to 3 hours without a meal. And it's almost like they fall apart and melt down. And that might not be the worst thing in the world, to go a little while without eating. But if you're going through this period of, these fasting phases, you can go a little while without eating. You'll get less hungry, but around 20 to 24 hours later, the hunger comes back again, but it's not going to be as bad as it once was. And there's a real scientific reason for this. There's this wave of hunger, and it's different for everyone, but it has to do with your hormone levels, like epinephrine, norepinephrine. These are also known as like adrenaline, insulin, things like glucagon, which is also produced by the pancreas, leptin, ghrelin. These things control our hunger. And it's also how our organs respond to these hormones. And again, I understand that this concept of fasting does terrify a lot of people. It's like a 5-alarm fire if I'm not eating. People like, what's going to happen? You're not going to explode. You're not going to die of starvation. If you're working on training, you're not going to lose all your muscle. And, none of these happens. In fact, you might actually lose a little bit of body fat. And we're seeing now that, as this is being researched a little more, that short sort of periodic fast might actually rev up your fat burning mechanism in your body, while it also may help to control glucose and insulin in your body. And there are important hormonal changes, and these changes mean that fasting might even help you if you're trying to build more muscle or get fit or athletic or compete or whatever. So, when you sum this up, you might lose fat, you might gain muscle, and you might be a bit better performance-wise. And that's just by skipping a few meals. And to me, one of the biggest takeaways from all this is I think it is important for people to understand that if you don't eat every few hours, it's not the worst thing in the world. And even if you're not trying to like lose fat or, get in a certain condition or whatever, I think it is important to lose that idea of that fear of not eating all the time and being controlled by food, and realizing a lot of what we do and when we eat and why we eat is dictated as much by the clock as opposed to listening to our own bodies. And I think it's good to learn how to hear your body and how to respond to it. I mean, if you're the average person, you're probably eating at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. And again, they call that abstract time when you do something based on what a clock says. And that's probably the biggest thing with our diet is we're not eating in tune with our body. And the problem is we're obviously eating all the time. We have access to food 24 hours a day, whereas our bodies in their, maybe primitive states, you might not have eaten for a couple days. And that's a little more in tune with how your body's able to function. We have constant access to not just food, but low quality food and high energy versions of these things, and soft drinks and mocha frappuccinos from Starbucks that have 1,500 calories. Obviously we have too much food. Everybody knows this. So it's maybe a good idea to learn not to be sort of like a slave to food all the time. And that's one of the big reasons why intermittent fasting and fasting in general has become a little more prominent in the health and wellness field. So here's an example of what it would look like to do a 24-hour fast. And again, I get it's scary. People seem uncomfortable with it, but that's probably why it's, not a bad thing to look into. So if you were to finish, this is on a Saturday, say you finish this is a 24-hour fast, you finish at 10 p.m. That's your last meal of the day. You have a couple cups of water, then obviously you're going to sleep through the night. I mean, you fast every night. Everyone fasts. And it's, when people have this concept of like, oh, I'd go 16 hours without eating. If you had a big weekend and you had, say, your last meal at like 9 o'clock on a Saturday, and then you don't go out for brunch till like 1 o'clock, you fasted for like 15 hours right there. So you've probably done this more often than you realize. So it's something that's very doable. But so say in this situation of the 24-hour fast, done at 10 p.m. on Saturday, 10 a.m. on Sunday, so it's 12 hours. You've probably slept for a lot of that. You would have probably a liter of water when you wake up. You can throw in some stuff like a greens powder or whatever if you want a little bit of nutrition. You can have a cup of green tea. At 3 p.m. on the Sunday, you're going to have another liter of water, and you can have another, like one of those greens powders, and again, another cup of green tea or a matcha green tea or something like that. Just a normal 1 cup. And then at 10 p.m. on the Sunday, you're now transitioning out of the fast, and you would have a small snack before bed, say like, some mixed nuts, like mixed raw nuts, like almonds, walnuts, sunflower seeds, maybe like a green apple, a couple cups of water, and then you're going to bed. And then Monday, you're right back to it eating normally. And that's what that fast would look like. And then if you're trying something like this, you need to be aware that you'll be hungrier than usual when you start eating again Sunday night and Monday. So it's easy to, think of those little games like rewarding yourself or having a low calorie day on the Sunday, that you just go overboard the next day. But it's more about learning to control how your body deals with hunger, and that a lot of our hunger is not genuine hunger. It's more cravings for getting into this habit of eating at these specific times, or craving a lot of these inferior foods, like specifically sugars or refined carbs. A lot of the times, if you eat a lot of those things, you're not feeding your body on a cellular level, and your body continues to crave the foods it doesn't get. So a lot of the times your cravings are for lower quality, high sugar stuff. So that's what a 24-hour fast would look like. And it's only like that one day, kind of over the weekend period. You eat normally for the whole week, and then on one day, you don't eat for a little while. That's basically all the whole reason behind it. And we're going to look at a few of the reasons why this is beneficial, from like how it's working in your body. Like, why would you starve yourself for a day? What happens. The first thing, like we're just touching on, hunger is not an emergency, and there's that panic when hunger kicks in if you're not going to be able to eat. I know what it's like. I've had that a ton of times, most of my life. Like, you freak out if you're not going to eat, but it's a feeling. It's not necessarily real. So when you commit and try out these short-term fasts or this 24-hour fast, you'll realize hunger really isn't something to panic over. Nothing bad's going to happen if you miss a meal or two. Like I said, we didn't have food available for, like our Paleolithic ancestors didn't have it. They might have had to go days without eating. So we evolved to deal with hunger and to deal well with hunger. So allow yourself to get hungry and then sit with the feeling rather than trying to make it go away immediately, and you'll learn to manage it better. And then again, there's a physical and psychological hunger, like I touched on, with like certain things you're craving. But often when people think they're hungry, they're not experiencing true body hunger, but a lot of times like head hunger or that depletion and, sugar dropping, like your blood sugar drops, and it's more of that cycle. It's not true body hunger. And it's good to learn the difference between the two. And then the better you understand your body signals, the more in tune you can be with it, and the more on track you can get with your own health and wellness. So with these fasts, you'll realize what real body hunger is like compared to that, like, psychological hunger. So that's starting with the psychological kind of benefits about learning to not feel controlled by your stomach. And now look a little more at the scientific and medical benefits. So now I'm looking at some good research and info from Precision Nutrition, which is one of the best online kind of health, wellness, nutrition, fitness. I don't want to call it a movement, but they do a lot of. It's based out of Canada, and it's probably the best online health coaching domain in the world. And everything they do is backed up by massive science. They're all like PhDs. Any of their information is from, real trials, real research. So when I'm looking at this information, I know it's backed up from these good sources. So in the case of intermittent fasting, we're starting to see that the clinical research on it is showing the benefits for health and longevity. And it's being, better investigated, better research, better findings, and sort of better reporting of that. So the data is showing that intermittent fasting, when done properly, might help extend life, regulate blood glucose, control blood lipids, manage your body weight, gain or maintain lean muscle mass, and more. And more people are doing it just in the like fitness industry. And if you follow a lot of fitness stuff or online things, like, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson does intermittent fasting. Hugh Jackman does it. People who like get in shape for big roles are constantly, and it looks a few different ways. And like I said, I do it, but I'll get into that a little later. And there's, the different formats. There's that 24-hour fast. There's doing it over a 16-hour fasting period, an 8-hour window. But basically, when we're looking at this concept of the fast, it's the benefits from it are amazing. So let's look at here. So here's what's reduced when you're doing some form of this fasting. Your blood lipids are reduced, including decreased triglycerides and your bad LDL cholesterol, reduced blood pressure, reduced markers of inflammation, reduced oxidative stress. And that's, about like free radicals, and antioxidants help to combat that. And, when you have too much oxidative stress or these free radicals, it's, it can cause certain diseases, DNA damage, all that sort of stuff. Reduced risk of cancer. That goes in pretty deep, but that's just some of the things we're looking at so far. Then it's going to increase your cellular turnover and repair. I think they call it autophagy. Basically, it's like a cleansing of your cells. Increase fat burning, increase growth hormone release. This is an amazing thing. With everyone knows about growth hormone, and you think of it purely from a physical standpoint, for muscle and power and that. But growth hormone is responsible for longevity and longer life. Increased metabolic rate, especially later in the fast. You get improved, like you said already, improved appetite control, Maybe that's because of those changes in some of those hormones, like I mentioned, like leptin and ghrelin and things like that. You have improved blood sugar control. That's a big one. So it's good for people with, diabetic issues or blood sugar issues, that your body's a little more what they call insulin sensitive. You don't need as much insulin pumped out. Your body handles sugar a lot better. Improve cardiovascular function, and it offers, protection against injury to the heart. This is interesting, improve effectiveness of chemotherapy, and it allows for higher doses more frequently. There's improved neurogenesis and neuronal plasticity. So that's like protection in the brain and better cognitive function. So, I mean, it does look amazing, and it's, why isn't everyone doing this? But everyone is doing this, like we mentioned before. And most people are at least fasting 12 hours every single day, unless you eat like right up to midnight, sleep 6 hours, and get up and eat right away. Most people, I mean, if you're having your last meal at 8 o'clock at night, and some people are probably even earlier, and then you don't eat till 8 in the morning, there's your 12-hour fast right there. You're already doing it. It's more about just like, kind of extending it a little more and a little more. And the more you extend it, and I'll talk about this in a bit about not, jumping in head first and going into like a 20-hour fast, but starting slow and building from there, which you're already doing. You're probably doing already this 12-hour fast. And the thing is, though, like, you want to gradually extend it, because the current research is showing that some of these benefits may only be realized after the longer periods of fasting, say around 20 to 24 hours. And again, that depends on your activity levels. So, example, again, this is coming from Precision Nutrition. If you're fairly sedentary during the fast, you may need the full 20 to 24 hours without food to realize those benefits. But if you're very active, or you exercise and you do it during the fasted state, that's something I do, so you can kind of time this all out, you may be able to enjoy the same benefits after only the 16 to 20 hours without food. So a 16-hour fast and then an 8-hour feeding window. So in either case, I mean, I think you still want to be exercising, if you were trying this and starting it slower, or eventually extending it. Everything seems to be amplified when you exercise, and you get those benefits. Like when you have that better growth hormone release, you should be putting that to use by being active. You don't have to be in the gym lifting weights, but that definitely helps. And you probably should at some point, but at least being physically active and let your body make use of those, better new hormonal changes. But before we keep going deeper, I think it's important to look at some of the problems, because it's like anything, it's just not clear cut across the board. And because when we're talking about people, we're talking about a huge amount of variables, and everyone's different. So it's not a black and white cookie cutter approach that's necessarily going to work. So if you're, if you've had reservations, or you're maybe not in favor of it, I'm going to look at some of the info again from Precision Nutrition about potential problems. So one of the first ones being that most of the research to date has been done using animal models, and most nutrition information is done with animal models. There's nothing unique there. There's very little things that are actually done with human studies across the board, whatever it is. So, animals they're convenient for test subjects, but they're not perfect for predicting human responses. So the animal data that suggests strong benefits of intermittent fasting, it's not necessarily going to predict what happens when people try it. But in real world results, a lot of people are having good success with this. And I'm not trying to sway anyone to do this or not. Again, this is something you have to decide for yourself, or even talk over with doctors or research more. But when you see people, I don't know, you can take this for what it's worth, but when you see people who do certain techniques, or, whether it's this intermittent fasting or certain types of training or whatever, when their job relies on how they physically look, whether they're fitness models, they do magazine stuff, they're competitors, they do, not necessarily just bodybuilding, but figure competition. When their livelihood revolves around how they look, and people like that are trying these things, maybe there's a little something to it. They're not going to risk losing their house and not being able to eat and not being able to pay their rent or their car payments by, wading into a certain technique that's only going to cause detriment to how they look. They need to look their best. That's their job. That's their career. So when some people are embracing these things, whose lives depend on how they look, maybe there is a little something to it. So that's just the thing when we're looking at any of these models. There's real world examples, but sometimes with the animal studies, it's not going to correlate exactly to people. So the next problem is intermittent fasting is often compared with normal eating, and whether that's standard, it depends what you're eating. In the case with the animal studies, they're going to be eating things specific to like whatever rats would eat, or if the average North American diet contains a lot of crap in it. Everyone's diet is a little different, and those, the people that are following what we would call a North American diet, and that's what I mean, full with a lot of processed foods, manufactured things, that's not really going to help you much for health, body composition, performance. And, in comparing study participants using intermittent fasting strategies to those using those, really crappy dietary intakes without fasting, of course, intermittent fasting is going to look better. Anytime these people who are eating a standard crappy North American diet compared to someone who's restricting all those things, and of course intermittent fasting is going to look better. So I understand that side of it. If people are just, maybe it's stacking the deck a little more in favor of intermittent fasting. This is just a legitimate point, I think, to consider. So if, say, someone is doing, they're eating all this manufactured crap and whatever, and then they go into, trying intermittent fasting for a bit, maybe it's not, the intermittent fasting specifically, it's more that they're limiting their intake of all those health degrading chemicals. So I know you can argue that's one of the main points of fasting, but however, intermittent fasting isn't required to reduce our intake of processed food, additives, pollutants. You can do that on your own. You can stop those anytime. You don't have to be intermittent fasting to do it. So if your diet looks more like that, you're better off, still eating regularly, but starting to move those things away. Start adding in more fresh, real whole foods, and eventually all that crap will be pushed to the side. So that's going to be a bigger step more than any intermittent fasting or fasting's ever going to have to start off with. Another issue is it just the fact that they're eating lower calories? And again, that might be the case, and especially, some people who if they've been eating bad and whatever, and they're trying to get on better track, some people do a lot better with breakfast, while some people do better with skipping breakfast and not having their first meal till around like 12 or 1. And they might be doing well because they're taking in overall less calories through the day. The person who's eating that breakfast first thing might be getting better results just because they've gone through the fast through the night, they stop it when they wake up, and then they're able to eat more at a regular schedule. So this is the thing. If you are, trying these sort of things and you're not having breakfast, that can be an effective strategy only if the rest of the day is in place well. Like if you have your times where you've got your meals planned when you're going to eat, if you're not having your first meals till like 12 or 1, it's important like that you're just not going crazy overboard and just eating everything in sight and not worrying about what it is because you've, come out of that fasting state. It's important that the structure of your day still looks good. And of course, your food choices are as clean as possible during that eating period, looking at clean, good proteins, like finding the best, like grass-fed proteins, like beef you can find, clean carbohydrates, like sweet potato, wild rice, brown rice, quinoa, obviously like double-digit servings of dark leafy green vegetables through the day, some good citrus fruits, berries, those things need to be in place. So people can have good results by, having these regular meals, having breakfast right away. But if you are skipping breakfast, you need to make sure you have that plan coming out of that fast and going into that eating window. So it's basically, in other words, it's not the breakfast, but what happens after the breakfast. I think that's important. This is where it's, where you're learning your body and kind of doing your own investigation and whatever to see how you feel when you don't have breakfast compared to when you do have breakfast. I was always like that, where I had to, have it, in the concept of not eating first thing in the morning. Again, it was terrifying. But like at this point now, I'm not having my first meal till probably, I don't know, maybe 1, 2 in the afternoon. And it's just something that feels a lot more natural. Like I said, we have so much access to food all the time that it's easy to overeat in general, and not having breakfast and having this fast continue to this later point in the day has been fine with me. But then there's some people who, they're better doing their breakfast first thing, but then cutting off their eating at like 5 in the afternoon or 6, and they're good for the day. So there's different approaches that you can do. And I think it's important for anyone to go at least 12 hours without eating. We don't need to constantly be eating. When we're constantly eating, we're altering not just our metabolism, but our circadian rhythm. And that's like, your biological clock. And it needs to kind of go in its own cycles and its own set. And it needs to slow down later in the day. But if you're eating later into the night, your body's still engaged and your biological clock is still active. It needs its time to like basically turn off, where you sleep, rest, recover, fast, and then it can get more in tune with the natural cycle. And the more your circadian rhythm is in check, the better it is for your overall health. And there's insights again to seeing that when this is compromised, that's when a lot of diseases and conditions and health issues come up, because you're not allowing this clock to run on this normal cycle. It's constantly engaged. It's constantly like active, and it doesn't have, it's like a burnout that happens in your body. So again, like I think everyone should be going at least that 12-hour period without eating, which you're probably already doing. And then, maybe extending a little further might have these health benefits for you. You might feel a little leaner, a little more energetic. You might notice, even skin improvements, better muscle tone, things like that. But it's looking at what potentially works best for you and seeing, skipping the breakfast, going for a couple days, it's not working well. You do better when you finish your meals earlier in the day. Whereas like in my situation, my last meal's around 10 at night. So I sort of eat from that 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock window. And I found that's sort of my sweet spot. But again, everyone's different. So actually, let's look at all the different versions. Like I said, there's that 16-hour fast with an 8-hour eating window. There's a 24-hour fast. Let's look at all the different ones. So the first one is the alternate day fasting. So that's a 36-hour fast with a 12-hour feed. So with this, you're simply eating every other day. So on Monday, you'd eat within a 12-hour window, say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Then you'd fast overnight on Monday, and all day overnight on Tuesday. You'd eat again from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, and so on. And you alternate back and forth. So the alternate day fasters are really needing to make really good eating choices. They're allowed to eat what they want on the non-fasting days, but I mean, the choices just have to be super, super clear. It's clear. Easy for me to say. Next one is meal skipping. And this is just kind of a random approach. There's no set time. Some intermittent fasting proponents believe we should behave like our evolutionary ancestors did as humans evolved to get their food and exercise randomly, and so should we. So this brand of fasting includes eating unprocessed evolutionary friendly foods, kind of like paleo sort of stuff, and randomly cycling daily calorie intake. And then, you'd skip breakfast or you'd skip dinner here or there. And the rules are very flexible. So it's a very random, unstructured approach. But if you're really in tune with your body and you've been trying different meal approaches, this might be something that you can kind of get more in tune with. So then there's another one called Eat, Stop, Eat. It's a little more obscure. It's a 24-hour fast 1 or 2 times a week, kind of like what I started with talking about, like looking at what a full original 24-hour fast would look like. So you fast full 24 hours, once or twice a week, still eating sensibly, little higher protein, obviously minimizing processed foods for the rest of the week. It's flexible. You can choose whatever 24 hours you want. If you want to go from breakfast to breakfast, you can do it. Just say eat breakfast on a Monday and don't eat again until breakfast on Tuesday. If you want to fast from dinner to dinner, you can do that. So eat dinner on a Wednesday and don't eat again until dinner on Thursday. So there's a guy, what's his name? Brad Pilon. He's Canadian. He's got a book called Eat, Stop, Eat. And he's one of the big proponents of eating that way. The next one is more what I follow, and they call it lean gains. And it's that 16-hour fast, 8-hour feed. It can go up to maybe 18-hour fast, 6-hour feed. I do that sometimes. So it's, got a few food rules on top of it. It's got to be a bit higher in protein. You should, you can cycle the carbohydrates. It's a little more athletic based, and that's why I do it. It includes training fasted, which sounds absurd, but I'll touch on that just in a sec. And it uses more nutrient timing, so you're eating the bulk of your calories after you exercise. So say, like I told you, my version, you could do from 9 p.m. till 1 p.m. I go from sort of 10 till 2. With the exercise portion, it seems counterintuitive to work out on an empty stomach, and you're not necessarily even working out on an empty stomach. What you can do is if you're going into the 16-hour fast, so say I've got 2 hours to go till the fast. So say till I break the fast, I'm going to eat at 2 o'clock. I'll do my training around 12 or 12:30. So that way, by the time I'm done, and give it another little half hour where you might have a little bit extended body fat burning, by the time that's all done, I'm right into the eating period. So then I can, it's not going to be a long time without food. And there's a few other things you can do. You can have like branched chain amino acids while you're working out. It, can preserve some muscle. You can even do a quick 20 grams of whey protein just before you start training, just so they're available in the bloodstream, and then there's not that muscle breakdown. It's really hard to it takes a lot longer to break down muscle than people think. So the idea of training like that seems kind of ridiculous, but it's to me, it's probably my favorite way I've ever trained. There's something, I don't know, your head's a little more clear. Maybe it's partly with the effects with intermittent fasting. Like I said, there's that cognitive function that's a little more upscaled, I guess. And I don't know, it's something you feel a little lighter, and you feel a little more mobile and still strong. Like I've training this way and eating this way, I've still been not as strong as I've been like way back in the day, but considering that you're doing a sort of fasted training, still even stronger than compared to like when I have meals and going to the gym, or if I've had, pre-workout meals, I feel sluggish. I don't feel, a little not as lively. I don't feel as energetic, even though I've got all this fuel for it. So I feel a little just stronger and leaner and a little lighter when I train this way. So if you've done this before, you're probably aware of it too. There's just more of that clear-headedness that comes with it. So that's the lean gains approach. And then there's another approach called the warrior diet. And this is a 20-hour fast with a 4-hour feed. And on this plan, you would either fast or eat very small amounts of specifically recommended foods now for the first 28 hours of each day, working out during this period. So you're going to be under eating, and then you would just eat the majority of your daily intake within a 4-hour feeding window. And after that 4-hour feeding period, you would repeat the under eating fasting for the next 20 hours. Generally, most people will place the 4-hour overfeeding window at the end of the day. It's a little more convenient, stuff like that. One of the fittest guys I know and strongest does this, the 20-hour fast 4-hour feed. So goes the whole day, trains, and then he doesn't eat till 6 at night, and then eats from 6 till 10. So, take that for what it's worth. So those are all the different approaches, and they seem very different, but we're looking at basically the same thing. A longer fasting period and a shorter feeding period. And they vary between, say it's 20 hours on and 4 hours off, or 16 hours off, 8 hours on. Like the feeding and fasting window just sort of shortens and widens depending on the choice. So it's the main thing about this period of time where you're basically just not eating every 90 minutes. I mean, your body's constantly active and your digestive system's working overtime and your pancreas is constantly secreting insulin all the time. It's just can be overwhelming on the body. And so again, like, I'm not saying everyone has to eat this way, but you already are a little bit, and maybe it's something you want to play around with. And again, I'd say read more and investigate more. Use this podcast as sort of a jumping off point. There's a ton of information out there now. I'll link up some more if you want to see some things. So if you go to regainedwellness.com/151 and just have a little deeper insights. I did an episode way back with a professor from the university I went to, University of Western Ontario, here in Ontario, Canada. It's now actually technically Western Ontario. His name's Dr. Peter Lemon, and he's a big proponent of intermittent fasting, studies it. I'll link that episode up. The whole episode's not just about intermittent fasting. It's about nutrition in general, and that is a touch-on point, so we both talk about it. So I'll link that show up. So if you go to regainedwellness.com/151, you'll see that right there. So again, it's just getting as much information as possible. I'll start like winding it down here. I think there's a benefit to it. I think our modern way of eating has caused us a lot of problems. The first step is, getting away from that and not worrying about when you eat, but worrying about what you eat, getting the cleanest foods possible, keeping it as real as possible through the day, and then realize, there are some benefits that it looks like that are coming from these periods of when you're restricting yourself eating. And if you've never done this before, just, do what you're normally doing. Remember when you've had your last meal of the day, think about when your breakfast would normally be, and then maybe extend it an hour or two, and then, slowly build up and maybe try a little different version of that. It gets complicated, and there's some issues and research out there in regards to women not going over a longer fasting period than more than 12 to 14 hours, ideally, just when we're looking at different hormonal levels and issues and stuff like that. So it's if you're a woman and if you are training and active in fitness, it's something it doesn't look like you want to go too far on. But then the idea of, maybe potentially building up and trying a 24-hour fast just to see what the health benefits can come from. And again, getting in more tune with your body and realizing what psychological versus physical hunger is like. I think it might have those benefits, again, to realize it's, not the end of the world if you don't eat, and allowing your body to kind of get into a better balance and not, constantly starving and stuff all the time. So, please read up more on it. I'll link up more articles if you want to go deeper into it. I'll put that whole precision nutrition information I got, and as well, one of the main guys, one of the PhD guys who runs the whole thing, and his studies, and he's doing all his blood work as he goes and stuff like that. And a little more deeper science if you want to get as much information as possible. So hopefully, like I said, this is a lot of information, a lot of science, insights, research, hopefully stuff you can take away from it. Maybe it's got you thinking. If you're not interested, again, not a big deal. You just want to, continue eating with a way that's been beneficial to you and that you've been able to kind of find that sweet spot with. As long as you're feeling like you're progressing and you're on top of your health and nutrition, then obviously keep going with that. These are just, intermittent fasting, stuff like that are separate tools now that seem to be available as we learn more about them and get more research and stuff like that. So, the more tools you have, the better equipped you are for building all your, your best health and your best wellness and everything like that. So if you had any more questions on it, actually just email me. I'll hopefully be able to answer everything. Email me info@regainedwellness.com. I read everything, so even if you just want to say hi or any other things you want to see potentially covered on the show, questions, everything like that, I'll be happy to check it out. Okay, I'll cut it off here. Thanks for listening. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you really like it, leave a rating and review. That makes sure that more people get exposed to it, can see it, and then everybody's happy. Okay, I'm done. I'll see you later. Bye.